All right, we're on the air. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Virginia 21's Hangout for Higher Education. Today's Hangout is on improving access to Virginia higher education. My name is Jared Calfee. I'm the Executive Director of Virginia 21. Virginia 21 is an advocacy group for young people. We bring together young voters from across the Commonwealth to make an impact on the issues that matter most to us. Students often cite financial challenges as one of the main reasons for dropping out of college, and that makes sense. The total amount of unmet financial need among in-state students has more than doubled from $315 million to over $800 million in just the last 20 years. As college costs go up, low and middle income families are often squeezed out of the system. So today we're very glad to have Secretary of Education Ann Holton with us. She's going to share a little bit more about how Virginia can improve enrollment and completion rates among students with financial need. We'll start with Secretary Holton, and then we'll take a few questions from our Virginia 21 student leaders, and then we'll take some questions from our audience out there in the world on Twitter. You can tweet your questions and thoughts along with the Hangout with the hashtag VA21Hangout. Secretary Holton, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jared. Great to be with you.
So give us your thoughts on improving access to higher education among low-income and middle-income students in Virginia.
Yeah, Jared, I'd love to share a few thoughts, but first I just want to say thank you to Virginia 21 for all the good work you do and for bringing us all together. You all are an incredibly important advocacy group and well-respected in the General Assembly and elsewhere, and we really appreciate your focus on these important issues. You know, we're very blessed in Virginia with strong education systems, both at the K-12 level and at the higher ed level. We're the envy of many of our fellow states. In our colleges, we regularly rank in the top 2 or 3 states in the nation in terms of higher ed attainment, in terms of high 4-year completion rates. We've got all kinds of things going right. We've got great range of 4-year schools, and I'm so happy we have young people here today from some of our larger schools and some of our smaller schools, some of our newer schools. It's going to be fun to visit with all of you today. And with all that, we have challenges. We continue in Virginia, as across the nation, to have a wide gap in higher ed attainment based on income. So it's not, it doesn't take rocket science to say that something about ability to pay must be involved when you see that folks from lower income family backgrounds have a much lower rate of attaining either a 4-year college degree or beyond, or alternative credentials that are leading to high wage in-demand jobs. The State Council of Higher Education, SHEV, is our organizing body for our 4-year and 2-year institutions here in Virginia, and has been engaged over the last year and a half or so in a strategic planning process with other higher ed partners across Virginia, and have helped us set a goal of a 60% higher ed attainment rate by 2030. We are currently at around 45%, and that's strong again compared to the nation. But to meet the workforce needs of our economy, we've got to be better. And the McAuliffe administration is very, very clear that part of the solution to that is we've got to help our young people coming from lower income backgrounds be more successful in accessing and completing higher education. And there are all kinds of barriers. Some of them are money and some of them are not. But we are absolutely committed to solutions, and really part of what I want to do today, I mean, I can toss out some of the solutions I've heard that we're trying to figure out how to facilitate here in Virginia, but I really would love to hear from our young people their ideas on what works and what we can be doing. And it's clear to me that as you look at our colleges, the SHEV folks and I have put them all our colleges on a graph of, measuring. I should have a chart for you, but I don't. Measuring how schools are doing on access. So what percentage of the school's population is underrepresented populations? And SHEV has a really great data and good measures, and their definition of underrepresented populations is very broad. It's first generation college, it's ethnic diversity, it's low income, it's all kinds, but underrepresented population versus success rates. And not surprisingly, some schools are really good on access and are admitting kids who might not in a prior generation have even aspired to college. And some schools are doing a really good job on completion, on getting their students across the students who enter across the finish line to a degree. We have very few that are in the top right quadrant up here being successful on both access and completion. And so one of the actively to help them set goals on access and completion, and then work with them on what we can do to pursue those goals. Some of the and around affordability, one of the key goals is one that really brings both of those together, and that is on-time completion. You all know this, that college used to be a 4-year deal, and now it's morphed into more and more and more. And some of that is kids getting master's program. That's great, but if you're taking 6 years to get an undergraduate baccalaureate degree, then the costs associated with that are just going up and up and up. And so on not only completion but on-time completion is something where we can really help move affordability. Some of the tools that we've heard proposed and that we're looking at to help schools improve access and completion are some that I would love to get you all's reaction to. Is one that has been introduced a couple of times in the General Assembly, but it was all in years when money was too tight to have it make much sense, is structured financial aid. What if we do something in how we allocate state financial aid, which is really a small piece compared to the big picture, the federal financial aid, but what if we structure state financial aid funds such that we reward completion? And we don't want to exclude young people who may struggle one semester somewhere along the way, but how can we incentivize kids to take more credits and to be progressing towards degrees? How can we help meet the challenges and the barriers with financial aid, but in a structured way? Structured pathways, and I would love to hear your reaction to this, young people, because we've heard a lot of expert solutions through a clear pathway that's going to get you to a degree.
You broke
Yes,
up
sir.
there for a second. Could you repeat that last point?
Yes, that one of the suggestions some folks have proposed is some sort of structured pathway system that could potentially help kids get to degrees better, but in exchange for you give up some of your freedom. And you all are all, I'm assuming, high-end kids. You're going to be wildly successful because you're here and energetic and participating. But let's assume that not everybody is as clear in their vision for their future as you might be. If a student coming into college says they want a criminal justice degree, what about we populate their schedule for 4 years with the classes they need to take, and you get some choice along the way, but you give up some choice too, and yet that helps you get done on time. Does that make sense? Structured financial aid, structured pathways, intrusive advising. Many of our schools are moving towards systems where students are the schools are using data analytics and technology to check up on the students and to not let folks slip through the cracks. But that may mean somebody who thinks they're in charge, young adults who think they're in charge of their own lives, or finding faculty members or somebody contacting them fairly early on in the semester saying, wait a minute, why'd you miss class? Why did you flunk that test? What can we do to help? What do y'all think about that? Is it off-putting or is it helpful? Community colleges as a stepping off point to 4-year degrees. We've got great community colleges in Virginia. One solution to financial access is to help young doing 2 and 2. Does that make sense? Are we on a right path in promoting that? So all of that's just to say I'm interested in you all's suggestions on how we can increase access and completion. I'm interested in your help on things we can do without new money, and I'm also interested in things that you think, if we have the opportunity to spend new money, how can we most effectively spend it? We are Governor McAuliffe is preparing his proposed budget for the next 2 years, and this is a chance to really put a mark on how we help higher education in Virginia. And he's very, very committed to the importance of education and looking for ways to be helpful. So if you all have got suggestions, if we've got new resources, do we put it into one pot or another? How do we best help? So I'll stop there, Jared, but I'm really interested in hearing what you all's questions are and what your suggestions and feedback for me are.
Well, thank you very much, Secretary Holton. We're excited that you and that the administration are willing to have an open dialogue on some both budgetary and non-budgetary solutions to some of these problems. The first question that we will take is from Hilton at Christopher Newport University. Hilton?
Hi, Secretary Holton. So my question is, have changes to Pell Grants and other federal aid programs impacted the way Virginia approaches allocating state financial aid?
The Pell Grants have expanded. The amount of the Pell Grants has gone up in the last 4 years, and that's been valuable. And then on the other hand, there have been some other new constraints on the Parent Plus loan program that have put some real squeeze on some of our colleges that are serving some of our young people from the most financially needy backgrounds. And I don't know that it has yet affected what we do in a significant way here in Virginia, because this is really the budget we're developing this fall is our first budget that we are developing in response since those changes have been implemented. And now's our chance to take it into consideration. I'm interested in, what do you think we should be doing differently, if anything, in response to those changes, or anybody else? Can I put him, Jared, back on the spot, Hilton? Have you got suggestions of things you think we should be doing differently at the state?
I don't really know any policy changes that I would suggest. I just know from a student's perspective, the whole area of financial aid and Pell Grants can be kind of confusing, and students don't really know what their options are, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. I know that's something that more the colleges and universities can do on their campuses to clarify some of those things, but I know students at my university can get a little overwhelmed with the whole financial aid problem.
Yeah, just the process itself is kind of amazing, isn't it, Hilton? I've done it with my kids, and I've watched my deputy secretary here in the governor's office was working with a young lady not long ago to help fill out the FAFSA, and got all confused and off on the wrong form. It's just way, way too complicated. And I do think that that's an important issue that's pending at the federal level, is as part of the Higher Ed Act that Congress will be looking to reauthorize, maybe theoretically within the near future. Should we be simplifying the federal financial aid process? The state financial aid process really inevitably, well, let's put it this way, we currently piggyback on the federal process, and if we did something different, that would make it even more complicated for students, because you'd have to go through a different process. So fundamentally, I think we're right to continue to piggyback on the federal process, but if there are things we can do to simplify the federal process, and I'm certainly advocating with our congressional delegation, and I hope Virginia 21 is too, because you all's voice would be very powerful there, and we have the advantage of geographic proximity to be working with the higher education, the committees considering the Higher Education Reauthorization Act. Some folks have talked about a FAFSA form that would be as simple as 1 page. It just doesn't have to be so complicated. Some of the schools have pushed, some of the colleges have pushed back on that, saying, well, they need a little bit more information for their own purposes. But you all, I don't know whether that's right or not. You all would be good voices on that.
Yeah, it's definitely a balancing act, trying to make sure that we're providing financial aid for the right people and the people that need it most, but also simplifying the process. I know that's something we've heard a lot from our students, that they're not sure whether or not they're eligible for financial aid. They're not sure how to go about getting it. They don't know what their options are. So that's definitely something we'd be interested in. So our next question comes from Shai at Virginia State University. Shai?
Hello.
Hi, Shai.
Hi, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Glad you're here.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you. Well, my question is, Virginia State University actually produces the most educators in the state of Virginia, the most minority educators in the state of Virginia. And most of them, many of us, are first generation, myself included. And what I want to know is, between the tuition that we pay, as well as some of the assessments and the fees that are not included in the tuition, that are tacked on to our responsibility as students in order to matriculate at our universities, how do you all plan to specifically help minority and first generation students? Is there anything that's specialized for us in particular? Since we do struggle, seeing that many of us, as I said before, are minority students and are first generation, so we don't have that background knowledge to help us out with getting finances and funds to help us fund our education.
And Shai, did I understand that you're in education school? You're a future teacher?
I am, actually. I plan to be a history teacher for secondary education.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Virginia State has great ed school programs, and I'm thrilled that you're part of them. And I'll just say something about that before I jump into your question, which is that we are really looking at a situation where we have fewer and fewer people wanting to enter the education field at the same time that we're public education, at the same time that we're placing higher and higher expectations on the system. And so we really, really need good people, and I'm grateful to you for entering it. We particularly need strong teachers who are ready to engage in our higher poverty communities with lots of need, and I hope you'll consider that. Virginia State is a leader in helping produce good teachers for Virginia, but particularly teachers who are willing to go into some of our high poverty communities. So I thank you for what you're doing. We do need to think about what we're doing for minority and first generation students, because it is absolutely right. It is partly about money. And both, well, Virginia State was one of the schools that was hard hit by some of the changes at the federal level around the federal plus loans. And we do need to be thinking about what we can do to help financial aid in those communities. But it's not just money. It is absolutely, you're right, a first generation student who doesn't have role models in the family, doesn't have folks who are used to the financial aid system, used to the college system, we need to be finding ways to give extra support. I had a young man I was working with not long ago who was very much doing college on his own, and God bless him, had gotten through 2 years at one of our great Virginia universities and filled out the wrong FAFSA form for year 3. He thought he was filling out a new FAFSA form, and instead he clicked the button to update the last year one, and it was one little thing snowballed downhill. It took ages for folks to figure out that's what he'd done wrong, and then he's a semester in and he's in debt, and everything can snowball and go wrong. And so I do think that one of the solutions is more counseling, more student support services, more folks wrapping their arms around and saying, what can we do to help? And I do think that all of our colleges are moving more in that direction. All of our colleges are asking us at the state level for more financial supports for that programming, advising, both faculty advising and staff advising, such that somebody should be reaching out to you rather than waiting for you to get into trouble and then ask for help. Somebody should be reaching out and saying, how can we help right from the beginning? How can we help you get an idea of what your career options are and what your end goal is, and then how can we help you plan back from that end goal to what are the steps you need to take, and if you're getting into academic trouble, way before it's a big problem, somebody intervening and helping connect with tutoring services. I absolutely agree we need to be doing that, and that many of our colleges are moving in that direction.
Great, thank you, Secretary. Our next question comes from Julia at Virginia Tech. Julia?
Hi, Secretary Holton. My question is, what is the likelihood that the governor's administration will increase investment in financial aid in the upcoming state budget?
Well, that's a great question, Julia, and it's a very important one. I do think that increasing the financial aid component of our state higher ed budget is a really important one, because the financial aid obviously that's what's geared towards those who need it most, whereas other funds that we allocate to the state higher ed institutions can be used for all kinds of things. Where we are on the state budget is that the discussion begins with the governor speaking with the money committees in August of every year. The governor announced education as a top priority when he spoke to the money committees this August. We're now in the period of budget development where we're coming up with ideas, but we're also working Secretary Brown, my colleague who's the Secretary of Finance, is working with experts to determine what the revenue expectations are going to be. If revenue expectations continue to get better, which right now they're looking good. We had a very tough year. Governor McAuliffe faced a big deficit in the budget his first year in office and had to make some very, very tough cuts. He was able to protect higher ed in large degree from some of the worst effects of those cuts, but he was not able to expand new resources for higher ed in that first year. But now we're looking at a point where if the revenue trend continues, we actually are going to have some flexibility. It depends on a lot of things. It depends on our federal friends not messing up the economy with a shutdown. It depends on world events such that the economy continues to get better. There's not a whole lot of appetite in our General Assembly, which is both houses at the moment controlled by the other party. There's not a lot of appetite for new taxes, so we're looking at what can we do with existing revenues. If things continue to go well, if the revenue estimates continue to be strong, I'm confident that Governor McAuliffe will be looking for ways to strengthen higher education generally. That could be many different things. It could be financial aid, it could be operations money for things like counselors and advisors that are working with students to do early notification systems and structured pathways. It also could be one traditional way that the state may be able to help higher education is through bond packages for for expansion or updates of technology and other construction needs. That's not going to help students in the short run. In the long run, it does help relieve pressure on other parts of the college budgets. So all of that's a long-winded way of saying if the revenue estimates continue to be good, I am optimistic that the governor will be looking to put new resources into higher ed, and that absolutely financial aid will be one of the top ways we'll be looking to help higher education. Obviously, that depends on a lot of things. What we propose and what the General Assembly disposes, there are a lot of roads to cross between here and there.
Well, that's definitely very good news to hear. We appreciated the governor's office staving off those cuts to higher ed last year, and that's exciting to hear that there's possibility for some new investment in the future. And just sort of piggybacking off of what Julia asked you, I wanted to sort of ask a follow-up question regarding financial aid. You know, we've looked at the projected need met in the upcoming years in terms of financial aid, and back in 2008 to 2009. In terms of student need, the state was meeting roughly 60% of student need as far as financial aid goes, and in this most recent year, that was down to around 30%. And I just wanted your opinion on what's the right amount of need for the state to be meeting. You know, obviously, we'd love to meet 100% of need, but realistically, can we start going in the opposite direction? Because need met in terms of financial aid has been going down year after year for the last decade or so, and is it possible for us to sort of stem that tide and start things going back in the other direction?
Well, I certainly agree with you that we certainly need to keep it from getting any worse. It remains the case, Jared, that Virginia's our higher ed institutions are still a bargain in two senses. They're a bargain in compared to the rest of the country. We have relatively healthy tuitions for the high quality institutions we have, and in terms of a higher ed degree is still a good return on investment. Any way you look at it, I was at a presentation at the Federal Reserve not long ago. But the earnings gap between those with higher ed degrees and those without remains sharp, and so it remains a good investment if you complete. So that gets back to one of my earlier points, is that I think one of the biggest challenges is folks who incur a lot of debt and don't get a degree. Those young people are really coming off worse than if they hadn't even embarked on the higher ed process in the first place. So I think that the focus on completion is extremely important. Can we change the trajectory? The higher ed expense, two things have gotten us where we are. One is the recession, and we have reinvested somewhat in higher education since the recession, but not a lot. We've got a ways to go. And the other is simply the increasing costs of higher education, which are just a real challenge across the nation. And so, yes, we need to figure out how to right that balance. Working with our legislative partners and working with revenue streams being what they are, we are absolutely interested in figuring out how to help right that balance. But within the constraints, I'm not sure it's going to be wildly different soon. I guess I think a fair way to think of it is how much debt is it fair to suggest that students come out of college with, and if you are going to one of our great state institutions, the good news is that you are likely not coming out with really, really high levels of debt compared to what you may be seeing elsewhere. I do think that that's an important focus, and some of our schools have actually started making guarantees that we will ensure nobody comes out with more than such and such amount of debt, and I don't think that's a bad approach. Some of our schools have wealthier endowments and can afford to do that more than others. Another really important approach, I think, is to promoting our community colleges. We've got some great community colleges here in Virginia, and we've got terrific articulation agreements between the 2 years and the 4 years. So if folks are looking for the most affordable way to get a great degree from one of our 4-year institutions, if you start out at the community colleges, your entire tuition is going to be paid by a Pell Grant if you're eligible. And then we have some significant resources poured into these transfer grants. So if you get your 2-year degree from the community college and transfer to a 4-year, you're off to a great head start in terms of what you spend in the first 2 years, and you've got access to the transfer grant money to help pay your college your tuition during years 3 and 4. So all that's to say, yes, we need to write it. How soon we're going to make radical change, I can't really be that optimistic that it's going to change radically soon.
Thank you, Secretary Holton. If it's okay with you, we're going to go to Twitter now and take some questions off of social media.
Great.
The first one is sort of a philosophical question that I know is faced at an institutional level sometimes, but also at the state level. Do you think it's better to meet a majority of financial need for a small group of students or a small amount of financial need for a larger group of students?
Well, that's an interesting way to put it, and it kind of gets back a little bit back to your last question, Jared. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect young people who are going to come out of our 4-year programs with good, solid degrees on a path to a good job, to either have, if they have some savings before they start college, to be using that obviously to help pay for school, but also to incur some degree of debt. So I would say if you spread it a little bit farther on the premise that a reasonable amount of debt with a good degree coming out of a 4-year program there's nothing wrong with that. It's not the $15,000 of debt or $20,000 even dollars of debt coming out of college that to me is the biggest red flag. It's the folks who are coming out with $30,000 and $40,000 of debt, or the folks who are incurring huge levels of debt and not succeeding in getting their degree. I don't know if I answered the question.
I think you did, and sort of in that same vein, how can state aid dollars be allocated to institutions more proportionately according to the need of the institution?
So, and that's a tricky thing because, really the need of the students is what we want. And we do have some schools that are serving proportionally more kids with higher need, and we have a wide range of tuition gaps. So, some of our more expensive universities students have more need in that sense because the tuition is higher. And on the other hand, we have institutions that are serving some of our schools. Virginia State among them has one of the lowest tuitions in the Commonwealth, and yet serves more students does a terrific job reaching out to and accepting students who are academically strong and ready to be successful, but have a whole lot of financial need coming in. So it is tricky to how do you allocate the funds between schools well. I think the premise should be based on need, based on student need, following the students.
Okay, great, thank you. And I'm curious, what's it like working with General Assembly members and with our state legislators on these issues? What's the progress been? What's the response been from those that you've worked with and talked to?
Virginia's higher ed system has good support in the General Assembly generally, but when it comes to money, it definitely there are folks, an awful lot of folks who've taken no tax pledges and who are willing to do what they can within existing resources, but are pretty committed not to going beyond that. We definitely see one house of the General Assembly more interested in financial aid, and the other house more interested in institutional support more generally. So that's always a tension between the two. I won't get into partisan politics here, but I will say in a nonpartisan way that now is a great time to be talking to your local legislators before Election Day. Financial aid, what is your commitment to higher ed support generally, and whatever it is you think is important, now is a great time to be talking to legislators from all parties, because if you get them committed on the record with you before Election Day, then you can come back and remind them that after Election Day. And Jared, having gone that far into the political arena, I'll stay again nonpartisan, but I will remind everybody that we do have an election coming up on November 3rd, and Virginia's our participation rates in elections tends to vary widely. In the presidential years, we have widespread participation. In the gubernatorial years, it's less. And in this year, the off-year cycle, it's even less. Partly that's affected by this gerrymandered districts that means we have very few competitive districts, so there's not as much discussion about the races. But part of it is on you guys. Your age group does not show up to participate in elections every 4 years. So I've already sent an email off to my out-of-state young people in my family, reminding them to get their absentee ballots, and I'm sure you all are working on increasing participation amongst your colleagues, and it's just so important. And I like to tell people your vote counts like 10 votes this year, because there are 9 other people not showing up, and if you show up, then you get to help determine for all of them, and it does make a difference. The Medicaid expansion is one issue that's be determined by what happens in our General Assembly this year, and there's significant revenue streams. If we manage to expand Medicaid, there's going to be somewhere between $200 and $300 million a year freed up for education or healthcare or whatever the collective will is that it should be spent on. But those funds aren't available to us now, and that's just the state revenue piece, much less the implications for the greater economy. So you all have a chance to help shape what happens in the General Assembly this year.
Well, I definitely appreciate you bringing up the election, Secretary Holton. We are currently conducting voter registration drives at our campuses all across the state, and that's our top priority between now and Election Day, is just making sure that students show up to vote. And something I frequently tell our students is that if they want their issues taken seriously, then they need to get to the polls, and that's really the only way to make it happen.
Absolutely. And Jared, use that occasion to remind us, what is the voter registration deadline?
I'm sorry?
Do you know off the top of your head what the voter registration? Yeah, Alexis knows. It's what?
It's October 13th, I believe.
October 13th is registration deadline, and I think you can request absentee ballots for another week or two after that.
Yes,
but we're absolutely in the midst of it. But also, even for those of you who I know are already registered and already active, if you can go meet with both camps. Go with even 2 or 3 students. They'll meet with you right now. They're eager to be finding their audiences, and go meet with them right now and ask them, what's your position on higher ed spending? What's your position on financial aid? It's a good time to have those conversations.
And speaking of our legislators, do you have an item at the top of your wish list for the upcoming General Assembly session?
Well, I'm working on, in addition to our higher education issues, I'm really working hard on public education funding issues. Public education also got severely hit in the recession and has not had significant attention. The JLARC study that came out just a couple of weeks ago confirmed what we all knew, which is that the impacts on our local schools have been severe at a time when they're serving kids with more needs, and where we've raised expectations considerably on their what we're expecting them to do in terms of graduating more kids and getting everybody college and career ready. So we're certainly advocating on the public education side as well as the higher education side. I would say, you know, the budget is certainly going to be the biggest discussion this year. Only thing, but it's certainly the biggest issue across my secretariat.
Well, thank you very much, Secretary Holton. And for our last question here, we'll take this one off Twitter, and this one is from Hunter Hinnant, and he just asks, how do we as a state try to get those kids who are in need of help into school, into college and post-secondary education?
Yeah, Hunter, great question, and that is something that we're looking at as part of our budget and other legislative initiatives this year. What can we do to help ease the transition? And as I said, one of the things is at the federal level is the what can we do to simplify the FAFSA, but much more than that, well, how can we get our K-12s and our colleges working together, working hand in hand? How can we, and there are a number of nonprofit organizations as college access programs that provide various services, but really, how can we get the nonprofits and the colleges and the K-12s working together to help young people be exposed to more career possibilities earlier on, thinking about higher ed earlier on, thinking about their pathway, and then structuring those pathways. And we are looking at ways to support a number of initiatives across the state. One of my favorites, the Pathway to Baccalaureate program up in Northern Virginia, is a collaboration of the 12 or 13 public school divisions, the Northern Virginia Community College, and George Mason University that seeks out kids that might not otherwise be aspiring to higher ed and follows them with an intensive support network all the way from junior year in high school all the way through to college. There are those who are encouraging those kinds of programs to move all the way back to 9th grade or maybe even 8th grade where our kids are all doing career plans. We're all now mandated to do career plans in 8th grade, and yet not a whole lot of effort's been put into help making sure those are a productive experience and that they're then followed up on as the kids move through K-12. Kids don't have a lot of access to counselors, high school counselors, because we're putting so many other requirements on our counselors. So lots to do, but I think that's a really important question. How do we get, especially kids who don't have a whole lot of family support, who don't have parents who've been down this route, how do we help them, how do we help smooth the pathway?
Well, there is definitely a lot to do, but we're very glad that you've been willing to make students a part of the conversation, and we're excited to be working with you to solve some of these issues.
So Jared, let me just say one thing before we close, that we do have a Education1 at education.gov. Am I saying it right, Eric? I can't do it right. Say it one more time.
Education1 at governor.virginia.
I'm so technical. Education1 at education.virginia. Nope.
Education1 governor.virginia.
Education1 at governor.virginia.gov. I'm sorry, is my email address, and you can send us any suggestions or feedback or ideas on what we should be doing with the budget or legislatively or otherwise to help improve higher education in Virginia. We love people's input.
Well, we can be sure to circulate that to our students, because I'm sure they would all have plenty to say, and we really appreciate that. We want to thank our students for joining us today to ask these questions, and for the people that joined us on Twitter and for following along. And Secretary Holton, we just really want to thank you for coming on and for answering our questions, and for being willing to, hear student voices and work with us on some of these issues. We're really excited to have you here today.
Great. Thank you, Jared. Thank you all. Have a great day, everybody, and a great semester.
A recent poll showed that college affordability is one of the top concerns of our voters here in the state, and so we're obviously working hard to address that. As Secretary Holton mentioned, we have important General Assembly elections coming up on November 3rd, so make sure that you have registered to vote, and make sure that you sign up for election reminders and learn about the candidates that are running to represent you. You can do that at voteyourdebt.org. Virginia 21 is driven by young people, so if you're not already involved with our organization, you should get plugged into your local chapter. You can go to virginia21.org to sign up. Thanks so much, everybody. Hope you have a great day.